Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
One question that came up, and maybe this is case by case, but you sign a franchise agreement, do the review, you move forward, you're 5 years into a 10-year agreement, and then you go to sell. Obviously, you have the ability to sell the agreement. You don't have to stay the whole 10 years, and you could sell it to someone else. When that buyer purchases the franchise, are they really continuing your franchise agreement, or are they usually signing a brand new franchise agreement, 10 years? I guess, what is normal in that case?
Well, that's a great question to ask. And it's a great question to ask the franchisor because it is dependent upon the situation. When I was at Cycle Bar, if you were selling a franchise and you've got maybe 6 years left on the term, so you're in year 4, the incoming buyer, we would love to have on a 10-year term. So what we would do is transfer over the remaining term so that the document itself, that franchise transfers over, and then you sign that franchise agreement, the transfer assignment agreement, and then we reissue a new agreement with a 10-year term. Now, there are situations though where you have a franchise, let's say that signed in 2020 and with a 7% royalty. And in 2021, the royalty went up to 10%. And so in those situations, you can work with the franchisee, the franchisor said, maybe we'll grant you the right to have that old royalty for the next 3 years. And then after that, you'll switch over to this other royalty. Certainly tweaks and changes you can make to it. But franchisors generally want you to be on a longer franchise term. They don't want you to buy a franchise and then you're out for 2 years.
Ultimately, when you're looking at a resale, you're looking at both franchise agreements, right? You're investigating the franchisor. Maybe you want to go out and start in a new territory. You're comparing that to the resale. So you're kind of doing double the due diligence, making sure you have the whole picture. Ultimately, you're going to be with the franchisor. So you want to make sure the fit's there for that 10-year agreement. Question I get too on, this is actually one that's been coming up for some reason a little bit more often, is what is included, and I'm going to dive a little bit deeper, what's included in the franchise disclosure document to give you a little bit more context. Every year, we're in refiling season. So every year in the US, they'll renew the agreement. It'll have last year's information. So the new FDDs coming out will have the 2024 data in that agreement. But specifically, I get questions like, well, okay, they're giving us a financial representation. They're giving it, which is an item 19 or an item 7. They're giving us a range of investment. What is normally included? Is that every single franchisee in the system? Does a franchisee have to be a franchisee for a certain length of time? I guess those are the questions I get just because it is only being updated once a year.
Item 19 generally is going to have financial performance representations spanning a full year.
Okay.
And with emerging brands, you may not have a full year of financials to disclose. And that's really been done on a case-by-case basis that the franchise lawyers or the franchisor's lawyers will decide what is appropriate in that context.
Okay.
I've seen some where they include just 6 months of data and that's all they've got.
Mm-hmm.
And with proper disclosure though, you can say, look, this is all we have. These are the 2 corporate owned locations. These are the data. This is the data and that's it.
Right.
And some in that situation will say, well, we only have 6 months. We don't have a full year. Let's just not disclose this year. Let's disclose when we actually do have a full year.
Okay.
So it really is dependent upon the franchisor's advice.
Perfect. Ultimately, what I advise is if you want some additional information, that is where the validation and the franchise validation calls, which is speaking with the existing franchisees. You may have someone that maybe was a few months in, but we're now in April. So they have three complete months of this year. And maybe it's not included in the FDD, but you can ask them like, hey, how are things going Q1 of 2025? Was the investment in line? What are your numbers looking like? So you can absolutely speak with franchisees. So it's a combination. It's the agreement. You can obviously learn a little bit more on the validation calls. And what I will also say in a comment I get is, although the items are the same in the agreements, the way the information is kind of presented is different. I've seen FDDs that have profit loss of every franchisee. I've had FDDs, item 19, that's completely blank because maybe they are newer or the model has changed and they want to give it time to reflect. And I have others where it's a paragraph. So there's no real, it's my understanding, there's no it has to state the numbers in a certain way. Is that correct?
Correct. It just can't be misleading. I've seen some that basically look like they are ripped off of the internet, that somebody, a bot from AI did it. They bought the franchise disclosure document from LegalZoom. And then others, they've hired these artisanal craftsmen who they put pictures and it looks like a painter created it. You want to just see the present or the information be presented in a way that's not misleading. It's very easy to understand. Average, median, highs, lows, disclosing when the locations opened up, I think is critical to have that. And then depending upon what type of business it is, just seeing how they break down the revenue,
Right.
and where that's coming from and how often. So you get a better sense of what you could potentially earn. And of course, they're going to have a disclaimer in there. Some outlets have earned this much. Your individual results may differ, but at least you'll get a sense of what is potentially achievable here.
Right.
And the best item 19s that I see are ones where I see the franchisee doing better than the corporate locations. And that's when I'm like, wow, it shows that the model works here.
Right.
They're doing better than the ones that you've owned and operated for the last 10 years.
Absolutely. I mean, they factor everything in, the royalties, but you want to see that. You want to see the franchisees doing better as they grow because they're just focusing on that one business. The franchisor has their location or their territory. They're running the franchise. They have a lot of stuff going on. And all that information is really gathered. That's direct input, even going to the investment, the item 7, which is the investment range. It's all inputs, right? At end of the year, they're gathering information from the franchisees. Maybe they are able to import directly from QuickBooks or whatever their accounting system is, but they're gathering that information because sometimes you'll see some ranges, 100 to 300,000. Well, that's a big swing. And there's a lot of variables. Obviously, if you're buying, leasing equipment or have a manager in place or running it full time, but that is all, this information is not made up. These aren't just estimates. This is what we think. It's give us your data. They put it all together and they have these ranges, correct? Am I correct by that? Okay.
Yep. And that's what they'll typically risk in the first couple of pages of the FDD. They'll talk about general risks when buying a franchise. And then the next page after that is special risks. And if a franchisor is emerging, they'll put in there that this is riskier, or potentially riskier investment. It has a short operating history. And I'll explain to my clients, yeah, it's because item 7 and item 19. If they don't have a whole lot of franchisees open and operating, they'll have all these other data sets.
Right.
Now, if they had 1,000 locations open, well, those 1,000 locations, they're going to be using that data to figure out what their item 7 ranges are. The data is going to be really solid. Item 19, they're going to show data from 1,000 locations. So it's an emerging brands. You've got to look at, all right, well, here's all the information we've got. And do I have enough to actually make that informed decision? Some will say, yeah, maybe I should wait until the next year's FDD, especially right now. But, the franchisor will tell you, hey, maybe the royalty rate's going up. You may want to sign under this version now because the next one will change. It's very dependent upon that situation.
And depending how long it takes for the refile and getting the new FDD, that territory may not be available.
Or the territories for some of these that are selling like hotcakes, a territory could be gone by that time.
Any other, there's all the parts are equally as important, and then I want to go into kind of your process and things like that. But when reviewing the FDD standouts, there's so many different sections, such as there's a legal section, right? If have been any lawsuits, can you talk to us a little bit about maybe a general overview? And then I want to go into your full process of areas to really think about or focus on, considering the whole document is equally as important.
Sure. Well, you mentioned litigation and item 3. And when I have candidates that see in an FDD litigation, they tend to get a little scared. Oh my gosh,
Right.
The franchisor is sued. And I don't necessarily, I take a look at every case that's listed. If they file arbitration, it's all private. So I don't know what happened. But if they file in state or federal court, I can typically see what occurred. Most of the time, it's just run-of-the-mill stuff, a dispute that you have with a franchisee. And there's really not a whole lot there. But if you see a lot of them, that then is an issue. And then
Right.
you look at item 20. So you see a lot of litigation in item 3, maybe 3 to 5 cases. And then you go to item 20 where it shows us the outlets. And you go to the transfer section and you see that they had 20 transfers last year and they had 30 terminations. Well, that may indicate that the franchisor is having a little bit of a crisis. And maybe they've got a new executive leadership team that is taking a really hard stance on maybe minimum performance guarantees.
Right.
And saying, all right, we need to clean house. So there's a lot to look at. And it's not necessarily looking at one individual portion or item of the FDD. It's looking at it in combination with the others. So if there is lawsuits listed, item 3, then I go to item 20. I'll look at trademarks, item 13. That's not something that people typically look at, but I want to see what potential revenue streams they're going to add on. So maybe filed other trademarks that they want to have. Also make sure that they own the trademark. When you buy a franchise, you're getting the rights to use the mark and the system in the territory. So you want to make sure that your trademark, you actually have the right to use it. And occasionally I've seen some issues with that. It's more of an administrative side where a different entity actually owns it and they have it listed in the FDD. But it's just making sure you've got the whole thing here. And I want to check and make sure everything lines up with what they're telling you.
Love it. It's a very important document. What I advise people on, and then I want to go into kind of the process is, number one, a franchisor will give you the FDD at different points in time. It may be on the intro call. It may be on the second call. The document is extremely important, but you want to make sure the franchise at the end of the day is a good fit. It's a legal document. It's not the most exciting document, but it is extremely important to review. So what I tell everyone is make sure the fit's there. It may take you a couple calls. You dive into the agreement, and then look into, as you move further along, maybe you narrow it down to 1 or 2 brands, or maybe it is that one brand, and doing that review. Now, the review you can do on your own. I always recommend looking into speaking with a franchise attorney, specifically, as we mentioned, a franchise attorney, not your friend who practices law that knows nothing about franchising. So it's always a good idea. It is an investment, but it's going to be a thorough review. It's going to give you kind of that peace of mind. It's going to answer all those lingering questions in the back of your mind. Is this normal wording? What do I do in this case? Can we do an addendum and that kind of deal? Highly recommend it. And this is done later on in the process. You want to make sure there's a fit. You had a chance to review it. And then as you kind of maybe start off with 3 or 4 brands and narrow it down, that's when you hire someone like Kit to do that review for you.
Kit's process provides clarity and confidence. What's his final crucial advice for anyone about to sign that franchise agreement? And what's the hilarious story about his movie debut with Robert De Niro? Stay tuned.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.